Okay, so here we are at the last of our post-Freudian theorists that we're going to talk about. And Alfred Adler is a fairly different theorist in some important ways. He was born in 1870. He's the third of seven children. And it's important to know in his biography, in terms of these ideas of his that we'll talk about, is that as a child, he was sick with something called rickets. It made him unable to engage in sports and just generally not well. And he was very accident prone. He also witnessed the death of his younger brother. So we'll talk a lot about his ideas of feeling frail or inferior, and it's easy to see where some of that might come from. He is a medical doctor and started as an eye specialist. And then he wrote an article in favor of one of Freud's writings. And Freud, because he's a bit narcissistic, because he wrote this favorable review, invites Adler to join a discussion group. And within the decade, he becomes president of the Psychoanalytic Society by 1910. And then in a story that feels very similar to Jung's, by 1911, he resigns over differences with Freud, that Freud won't tolerate that Adler is developing his own ideas, and they part ways. 9 of the 35 members, about a quarter of the members of the Psychoanalytic Society that Freud leads, leave with him and create the Society for Individual Psychology. And that idea of individual psychology, excuse me, that idea of individual psychology remains strong. We even have a couple of this in Adler School of Clinical Psychology that in Chicago that focuses on this. So that remains an idea that we have. He comes to the United States just before the start of the Depression and becomes faculty at Columbia University. And so his life is lived fairly locally to us. And I like this quote from Adler: humans are primarily social beings and are motivated by social urges. This is inborn, and then specifics are shaped by experience, right? And so I want you to think about how this is the same and different from Freud's ideas. Freud, of course, talks about the child coming up against the social world, and this is very similar to that. But he focuses more on individual experience than Freud does. Freud thinks that we have more universal experience, and Adler much more focused on individual experience. And so some basic ideas of Adler's. He emphasizes the role of what he called inferiority, that he believes that this can either, and usually is, a healthy experience, that if we feel inferior, then we strive to be better. And that striving is really at the center of his idea of healthy functioning, that we're always striving to be better than we are. And that as long as the feelings of inferiority aren't overwhelming, that will be a healthy process. If the feelings of inferiority are overwhelming, then that may not, in fact, will not be a healthy process. And so this idea of striving should be front and foremost in your mind. Part of the striving is this idea of fictional finalism, where whatever goal you're imagining now, so you're thinking, if I could just get through school, then I'll be happy. But by the time you get through school, you'll have, if you're functioning in a good, healthy way, you'll have assembled a new set of goals. And that new set of goals will now be the thing that you're striving for. And so we're constantly moving the finish line, essentially. And that this is really important for Adler, because the idea is that if you don't move the finish line and you finish, and you think, I'm all done, I did everything, right? That you then will stagnate. That there'll be no place to move, no place to go, there'll be no reason to grow your personality and grow who you are, and that in fact you will become somebody who's not psychologically healthy. Right? And then there's also this idea that we will fail, and that our ability to meet or life's challenges and to overcome those, to continue striving, is a central factor in who we are. And then if we have lots of failure experiences where we can't meet the challenges because we're sick, because whatever other circumstances, because of limitations imposed on us, that in fact that's going to shape your personality in more negative ways. It's a very optimistic theory, and the idea that you have lots of control over who you are at any given point in your life. He rejects Freud's ideas about women and rejects the idea of penis envy, and really doesn't talk about sexuality much at all. And he really focuses on conscious process, that we know we're striving, and that we know we feel inferior. So this idea of inferiority, if we delve a little bit into this, this is very similar to Horney's theory of the basic anxiety in childhood. He focuses on inferiority rather than anxiety, but sees this as very normal for children, that children are smaller, weaker, less competent than the people around them. Certainly all children spend some time being the youngest in their family, even if more siblings will come after them eventually. But that, think about how often children are told when you're older, when you're bigger, that they're told all the time they're not enough yet. And even if we don't mean to say that to them, and that feeling of inferiority is the thing that drives children to mature, to grow up, and to become more. That we all always also experience inferiority at other times, and that might be objectively true, that we really are less good, and so we really are having a harder time in school than the people around us, or we're trying hard to be creative and we're not as artistic as we want to be, or not as beautiful as we want to be. Like, that might be objectively true, but also, as you well know, sometimes it's just a subjective experience that other people don't know what you're talking about, but that it's felt by you anyway. And it doesn't matter. If you feel inferior, that's the only thing that matters. And that this is always an issue of social comparison, right? Either real social comparison, I really am getting less good grades than my siblings or my friends, or imagined, where I'm looking and saying that person is smarter than I am, even though there's no objective evidence of that. And again, right, healthy personality is about perpetual improvement. And unhealthy is about the lack of that perpetual improvement. And as long as inferiority is moderate, we will meet the challenge, we will try to overcome it, and that's healthy. But if it's not moderate, then we use compensation to make up for those perceived weaknesses, right? So that if the feelings of inferiority are really strong, then it may be that we decide that there's no way to overcome it, that no matter how hard I try, I still won't be smart enough. No matter how hard I try, I won't be beautiful enough, or interesting enough, or whatever it is. And then we develop compensation in various ways. And so an inferiority complex is a sense, right, you may know that term, but essentially it's when the sense of inferiority becomes a central feature of your existence. And then you just say, that you might hear people say, like, I'm just not good enough, or I'm just not smart enough, right? They're not trying, they're not striving, which is the word Adler uses, to overcome that. They've just given up. Then some people have what's called a superiority complex, right? And you might know the phrase, you might use the phrase, somebody feels superior. Similar to Freud, by the way, it's important that we pay attention to the idea that these terms that we use really commonly are Adlerian terms that come from Adler. We've just adopted them into our broader culture. It's not that he used existing terms, he made up these terms. And so the superiority complex, somebody feels superior, right? This occurs for Adler when somebody actually feels inferior, so there's an unconscious process, but they repress those feelings, those overwhelming feelings of inferiority. So they feel really inferior, they don't feel like they can do anything about it, they stop striving, and they repress the feelings of inferiority, and then live as if they're better than other people. But the result, the really important to pay attention to result, is that they're still not striving. If I think I'm better than everybody else, then I'm not trying to be better than I have been, right? If I think I am the smartest, then I have no motivation to strive to function better in school if I think I am the best. And so the actual absence of striving still results in the same problematic, unhealthy personality. And we may see substitute compensation by countering weakness by excelling in another area, and that's healthier. That's okay. If somebody's striving in another area, they've given up trying to be the smartest, but now they're going to be the most beautiful or the most athletic or whatever it is. And that's a healthier outcome here. The least healthy outcome, or the less healthy outcome, is overcompensation. Well, no, I'm sorry. I'm saying the opposite thing. That overcompensation is when you actually strive really hard to be better in that area. Those are both okay. It's when we just sit with no compensation and decide that we're the best and we're not striving. So the outcome, right, is striving is healthy, not striving is not. So think about what questions you have about Adler, and we can cover those when we meet. Have a good day.